the moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Yeah, but it really is like when you can get up to speed and you're just cruising, it's so fun.
So hi everybody. We are just in the middle of scooter talk, but
yeah.
But Christina's back.
I'm back.
But Jeff is not. We've played musical chairs and we've traded out places.
Well, Jeff was not going to be here for this week no matter what. There was going to be an incident.
Gosh.
There was going to be a sickness.
Could you imagine Jeff watching our second feature?
Well, it's funny because we'll talk about this. I think both of these movies are sort of high on atmospherics, but not necessarily scary.
Well, we'll quantify that once we get to the second one. But do we have any news?
I think for news this week, it was really, Beetlejuice 2. Do you guys talk about that?
I think we may have mentioned it, but like on-set photos have leaked since.
Yeah. And one thing that's kind of frustrating me is that, the discussion around this movie is all about Michael Keaton, obviously returning, yay, right? And then like Jenna Ortega is in it, and everybody's like, and Jenna Ortega's in it. And then like as an afterthought, people are like, and Winona Ryder. Like Winona Ryder was one of the stars of the original film. Can we not marginalize her just because she's a middle-aged woman?
It's funny you say that because that is what I saw regarding this is her in an on-set photo, like in a car, but it looks like she's got the same haircut that she did in 1988 or whatever it was.
I mean, she's still Lydia.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess people would be very upset if she didn't have the same haircut. So
yeah, it's just been annoying me because I keep seeing headlines and it's like Michael Keaton and Jenna Ortega and Beetlejuice 2. And I'm like, and Winona Ryder. Like she should be at the top of your list. And then the other thing, and this is also related to Michael Keaton that I saw this week, is, we've talked about how the various issues with the Flash movie, right, related to Ezra Miller.
Yeah.
But this film is starting to get screenings, and like at least my whole family has agreed that the preview at least makes the movie look better than it has any right to be.
Yes, and as we have said the same thing ourselves on this show, that we're actually anticipating this.
And on Twitter this week, I noticed that Stephen King happened to see an early screening of this movie, and he said, I don't usually like superhero movies, but this is one of the best that I've ever seen. It's just one man's opinion, but
it is.
But
Stephen King is doing like jacket quotes for DC movies, and he can't give you the time of day.
Stephen King, please blurb my book.
Yes.
Yeah, but I was kind of surprised by that because he's usually he doesn't talk something up unless he really likes it. That's one thing I've noticed about his like social media feed. Like he doesn't say he likes something unless he really likes it.
Yes. He doesn't say much, but when he does, it counts.
So I was like, wow, okay. And he's not even really a superhero fan. I'm really starting to get pretty excited for this movie. Obviously excited to see Michael Keaton as Batman again. Excited. It just looks really good.
Yeah. Although I hope that they're done with the trailers because I normally stay away from the trailers, but I watched both of these completely different. They show different scenes. So now I feel that I've seen quite a bit of this.
Enough of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, like, if there was going to be a twist or a surprise, it would be like the presence of Michael Keaton in the movie, and they obviously decided to lead with that. So, I mean, a lot of times I just think, how much surprise can these superhero movies really have
Yeah,
anyway?
because
But
if anybody was, on their game with this in the past 2 years, that Michael Keaton is in this. So
yeah,
that's not some big reveal. They
yeah.
tried to do that with Spider-Man No Way Home. Didn't work.
Well, it was funny because, right, there was the constant rumors about Andrew Garfield,
Yeah.
right? But I think that was almost like a sleight of hand. Like they kept Tobey Maguire under wraps because everyone was like, Andrew Garfield's going to be in it. Like
Yeah.
the left hand, everyone's looking at the left hand while the right hand was doing something else. When I remember about seeing No Way Home is that, when Tobey Maguire came out, people started clapping
But
in
I
the
don't think that's
theater.
that's because they weren't expecting him. It's just
You
because they
know?
were happy to see him,
Yeah.
you know.
But I think they did a pretty good job of keeping Toby under wraps, at least better than the Andrew
Andrew
Garfield
Garfield.
appearance. Yeah.
Well, I think it also is that Andrew Garfield, he's a busy guy. You don't really see Tobey Maguire much, unfortunately, in a
Yeah.
lot of movies, but you do Garfield. So he's doing press for other things. And of course, he's going to get asked. So
Yeah.
he tried his
Yeah.
best. He tried his best, but,
I do think, man, you say that you think about the era when it seemed like Tobey Maguire was in a lot of movies
yeah, yeah.
and I just always really liked him as an
Hmm.
actor, and I think a lot of people feel that way about him, like I said, when we did the Spider-Man review, like as an actor, you just feel like he has his heart in his eyes, and I think he really connects to the audience in a way that not every actor does. And yeah, it's really a shame that for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like he's doing as much stuff lately.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because leading up to No Way Home, I knew that both of them were going to be in it. So I started from Spider-Man 1 with Toby and had my son watch them all because he'd only seen the Tom Holland movies. So after we watched them all and watched No Way Home, I asked him, well, who's your favorite? And he goes, Toby Maguire.
Yeah. I just
So,
think he makes a connection to
yeah.
people. It's not just in Spider-Man, it's just kind of in everything he does. I think he really connects with the audience in a way that like not a lot of performers do.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Other than the Stephen King tweet about The Flash and the Beetlejuice stuff, I'm not sure that I've seen any big news this week.
No, I haven't really. There's more scuttlebutt about Godzilla versus Kong 2 or
Hmm.
whatever it is they're calling it now. I won't share that here because I don't like to, I didn't want to be spoiled, so I'm not going to spoil anybody else. But having said that, we're going to spoil these two movies if you haven't seen Evil Dead Rise or Wreck. Now, would you
Yes.
call it Record since it is short for Record or just I would just call it Wreck.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's their intention
Yeah.
is to
Hmm.
call it rec. Otherwise, they would have called it
They
record.
would have called it Record.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, but hopefully by this point, because Evil Dead Rise has been out for about 5 weeks, people have had a chance to see this, and people may have a pretty good idea of what this movie is about,
Yeah,
even if they
yeah. If
have.
you've seen one, it's not a huge deviation from the formula.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about that because so much was made, at least from what I saw in headlines, um, about moving the
Moving
the
locale,
the
right?
movie to the city. Like it's going to be in the city, it's going to be completely different, but they're in a condemned building. And then
Hmm.
there's an earthquake, which basically takes out the elevators and the stairs, and there's only a few other people on the floor. So functionally, they're in a cabin in the woods.
Yes, yes, yes. It's not like they pull a Jason Goes to Manhattan and they have rampant possession on the streets of a large city. It's pretty much the same plot points as you've
Yeah.
seen.
Because they're so physically isolated. And this actually, I think we can do a fair comparison to Scream 6, which we just saw, which also moved to a city, right? Same kind of thing, like, oh, we're moving from like this small town in California to, you know, New York City and it's going to be different, but in the end, Scream 6 didn't really feel that different
No.
from, I think the thing is that you're trying to, there's always, it's like such a delicate balance I think you have to make when you're trying to reboot a franchise, especially one like this. Horror movie fans tend to be very, very territorial. We like things the way we like them. We don't
Yeah,
want anything
yeah.
to change.
That's
Um,
why now I want to ask you, did
yeah,
you ever watch the 2013 reboot, reimagining? Because I never did.
me
Because
neither.
I was kind of staunchly, I don't want to, if I want to watch
Exactly.
this, I'm going to go watch the original.
Exactly. I was like, I
Yeah.
don't wanna. I'm just gonna watch Ash versus Evil Dead.
Yes, yes, I did as well.
Um, but yeah, that's exactly. And and I feel bad in a way, like I didn't try to give that movie a chance, but I also didn't watch the reboot of Nightmare on Elm Street, because I was like, it just doesn't look like what am I going to get out of this that I'm not going to get out of the original. Um, so in light of that, I think that this film walks a pretty good line in terms of trying to satisfy fans of the original film series. There's a lot of
Hmm.
references. There's a lot of references.
Yes, there are. Almost to the fact where you're rolling your eyes when they give you the references.
But at the same time, trying to establish something new for the franchise going forward, like a new heroine, that kind of thing. But that said,
That was a pregnant pause if there ever was.
well, I mean, I want to say up front, I did not dislike this film. Okay. I had fun. I enjoyed myself. But I feel like a lot of this movie is telegraphed ahead of time. Like, as an example, when you have the opening, not the very opening scene in the cabin in the woods. Well, actually, you can go to that one, and talk about that. So the obnoxious boyfriend at the beginning of the film has a drone and he like flies it up to the head of his girlfriend's friend. And she's like, "You could have decapitated me." And he's like, "No, it would have been a lot messier if it had because the blades wouldn't have cut
It would
cleanly."
just mess up your face or something. And
Right.
you're like, oh, I'm going to see this mess up somebody's face.
Exactly. And you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, this guy's going to be decapitated later by his own drone." And sure enough, a few minutes later, he's decapitated in a messy way by the drone, right? And
No,
then
no, no. He is actually decapitated by Jessica because she
well,
throws his
it's not
head out of
clear
the
because
water.
it comes the drone and Jessica and him all go underwater. So my impression was that she used the drone to the
Perhaps, but
cutting.
I think she was more than capable of doing it herself.
And then that's sort of the opening scene. And like the thing about the opening scene in this movie is it sort of establishes like this movie's not messing around, right?
No, but it is at the same time
Yeah,
because you're
yeah.
given a misdirection because
Hmm.
it opens with the same wild point of view camera shot, which
Yeah,
you like, oh, I'm right in it now. This is like a Raimi movie.
yeah,
And it's not. It's the drone. It's the
right,
drone's point of view that's going madly through the woods and right up into the character. And it's not a demon. It's not the
right.
evil spirit. It's the drone.
Right. But then they very quickly establish a baseline for gore for the movie. Like, if you can't handle the first 5 minutes of this movie, you're not watching the rest of this movie,
Right,
because a
right. Which
character gets scalped right off the top.
manually, not,
Yeah.
and when I say manually, with no tools, just by
Yeah.
hand.
And it was funny because I was watching it and I like the scalp gets thrown on the dock and the camera lingers on it for a long time.
Yeah.
And all I could think was Jeff would be like, "Nope."
No, no, or more likely he'd be slunk down in his seat so he couldn't see the screen.
Jeff, we love you.
Of course, that goes without saying.
But this is not your movie for sure.
You mentioned that there's a lot of Easter eggs
Yeah,
for
there is.
those who are, in the know.
Yeah.
starts right here because, always when the first person gets it,
Yeah.
gets possessed, like in the first one, I don't know if it doesn't happen in every movie. Something very similar does, where I forget the character's name, but the first girl that gets possessed is reading the cards that she can't see.
Right.
Ace of spades, da, 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 and then she turns around, she's a demon. This one, Jessica, is reading from Wuthering Heights. And then falls over.
Yep.
And that happens in pretty much every one.
Yeah,
Somebody's
and every
like
time the
slowly
person's
approaches them. Yeah. I was very happy to see that and a little
Mhm.
bit taken aback, like, oh, they're going here again. But more so happy. I think if I had to balance it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is an Evil Dead movie. So the setup is that this girl, Jessica, who is the possessed, is there with her, was it her sister or her friend? It was her friend. Her friend, and then Jessica's boyfriend at a cabin in the woods that they're staying for the weekend. A bunch of other kids are supposed to come, but they didn't. So it's only the three of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Jessica's the one that's possessed. You don't know how. You just kind of are thrown into this, and she's already taken over. She scalps her friend because she's got a very convenient pigtail that she uses to do the scalping. Comes out to where the jerk boyfriend is on the dock, hits herself in the face with the blades, just as the boyfriend prognosticated a little bit before, falls in the water, and then the boyfriend goes in. The head comes back out onto the deck. Yeah. And this poor girl who's been scalped is sitting there, still scalped, bleeding down her face on the deck, watching all this in horror. And then you get probably one of the greatest title reveals.
Yes, with her body rising.
At the same time, the title of the movie rises behind the mountain line or whatever in the background.
And there's a pool of blood forming underneath her. So it looks like the title's rising out of this pool of blood. So it is really effective visual. I do want to say, I think Lee Cronin does a great job in terms of those kinds of visuals in this movie.
Especially the way that he films Ellie. Yeah. Maybe it's just the actress's face. Like she is really selling her possession, the demon part of her. And you can tell that she is having a great time doing it. She is completely invested.
I listened to an interview with her. I really didn't know who she was, but she's an Australian actress. She actually worked as a model for a long time. And I guess her big break was on the TV show Vikings, which I didn't
No, I've never seen it. Nope.
But she said she really enjoyed doing this and, the physicality of it and getting to play such an extreme character. The only thing she said she didn't like, and I sympathize, is the vomiting scene. Because she's like, they have to put a tube inside your mouth with the stuff. Like it goes in and then
where's the tube connected to if it's in her mouth?
Yeah, it's like they have to put the stuff in the tube.
They must have erased it somehow if it's in your mouth and coming out from the other end.
And then it has to like eject.
Yeah.
And she was like, that was horrible. I'd be happy never to do that again. But everything else was fine.
So her name is Alyssa Sutherland.
So anyway, going back though to what I think didn't work as well for this. The thing where I feel like everything's telegraphed. Right at the beginning of the movie, the camera goes through this apartment establishing this family, right? Ellie and her kids. You see all of these objects in the house that if you've ever seen a horror movie, are going to become weapons at a later stage of this film, right? You see the tattoo needle, like, oh, somebody's going to get it with the tattoo needle.
The scissors that are slid under the bed. Those are coming back because they know where that is now.
Yep. The staff that Cassie's making.
Daphne. That's probably the most telegraphed.
But there's a lot of stuff like that where you're kind of like, oh, I know this is coming. And this is a little later in the film, but I really wish the cheese grater was not in the preview because it would have been so much more shocking if you just saw it in that moment. If you saw her pick it up and you were like, but because you knew it was coming, you're like, oh, okay.
But that is, like I said in an earlier episode, that's what separates the men from the boys. If you see that, that's probably the one biggest selling point in the trailer is that cheese grater scene.
But there's a lot, I think, that is, like I said, kind of telegraphed ahead of time. And I wish it wasn't. kind of where things are going, like almost every step of this movie.
Like we said, it follows the same beats of any other Evil Dead movie. So unless you're coming in new to this franchise, it's nothing that happens in here is really a surprise. Although I may want to amend that because I enjoyed it as well. I saw it twice, actually. I saw it in a theater. And then, 2 days after I saw it in the theater, I saw that it was coming to
streaming.
Yeah. So I saw it in the theater 2 weeks ago, maybe more now. And just to reacquaint myself with it, I watched it last night. The theater that I saw it in, it was on opening night of Guardians of the Galaxy. So the theater itself, the complex was packed. And my theater for Evil Dead Rise was also packed, surprisingly, because it had already been out for a couple of weeks when I saw it. The audience, which had a fair amount of not young kids, but probably 10, 11-year-old kids with parents, not by themselves. The audience was silent throughout this thing. There was one guffaw. I forget what scene it was. It was one of the over-the-top gory scenes later in the movie. From some, like a nervous guffaw from some guy in the back. But it wasn't like everybody was screaming and yelling and laughing, which is kind of what you want in a horror movie experience, especially one like this.
Yeah.
It was like a grim viewing experience with this audience.
And I wish I'd had a chance to see it in the theater. I did not get a chance to see it in the theater. And I always prefer to see horror movies, at least the first time in theater, because I do feel like it's always to the benefit of the movie. Even if I sit at home and like try to make the experience as appropriate as possible, like I watch it without stopping and, try to give it like its full credit. I'm watching Evil Dead Rise yesterday and across the street, someone's got a leaf blower. It's like, it's just not really.
Did you at least watch it at night or in the middle of the day?
I had to watch it in the afternoon.
Oh, no. There's like 50% of the impact is gone.
I know. And my son was having his friends over yesterday, so I had to like watch it before they came home. And I was like, but it's just how it worked out. It wasn't ideal. It was still, like I said, I still enjoyed it, but I think I still would have felt in a lot of ways the same way, even if I'd seen it in the theater, that you see a lot coming.
Yeah, it was okay. That was my takeaway from it,
Yeah.
So we're introduced to the main characters of the movie after this big opening. Because, the big, the legend on the screen, one day earlier, something has to happen, messed up in 24 hours to get to that point where we were at in the cabin. So you're backstage at some punk rock concert and there's a girl that's in the bathroom and she's like the head roadie. She's got a pregnancy test. And this is Beth. She finds out she's pregnant. She goes to visit her sister in Los Angeles, who is the aforementioned Ellie. And she's got 3 kids, 2 teenage kids, and a young girl, Cassie. And Ellie's husband has just left them. So Beth has been estranged because she's, got her mind on her roadie job. So she doesn't even know that the husband has left. So this has caused some stress between the sisters, especially once Beth shows up and Ellie's like, I've tried to call you, you're never there for me. And you show up when you need something. So there's nothing quite like a Kandarian demon breaking the ice between 2 sisters. Because this is exactly what they need to really let loose their feelings.
I think one of the things that works here, though, is that at least before Ellie becomes possessed, it feels like all the relationships are real. Like, the relationships between the characters feel like real people. Although, of course, Beth's pregnancy test is positive because nobody in a movie ever takes a pregnancy test that's negative.
Right. Well, she wouldn't bother going to see her sister if it wasn't.
And I'm also always a little uncomfortable with this idea that like motherhood sort of makes you like a superhero. Like during the first trimester, I did not feel like fighting Kandarian demons. I felt like lying down until the first trimester was over.
Well, then again, they didn't show up at your front door either.
Anyway, I think one of the things that feels real is like you can sort of feel their frustration with each other, but you can also feel like that they love each other, they care about each other. And I think it's the same, with Ellie and her kids, like the relationship just feels like a real parent who just,
Yes. And I think that's why I liked Ellie the most out of all
Mhm.
these characters. And she's taken from you almost immediately.
Yeah.
It's like the movie becomes less fun when you realize that this character is not going to be redeemed. Once she gets the scissor to the face, you're like, okay, I guess we're not going to see her
Yeah.
normal again.
Yeah, it's all over now.
And
She's
that's a
not coming
sad
back.
thing. This plays out like a tragedy. So even when they're throwing in the Easter eggs, like, we'll swallow your soul, come get some, but it's
Dead by Dawn.
there's an air of tragedy around it. Even though I said and you said you had fun watching it, it's not quote unquote a fun movie. I think
Yeah.
because of that. So Ellie gets it, and the two older kids that you also like, they don't set these people up as jerks like the boyfriend at the beginning, who you don't give a damn about when his head comes flying out of the water. You care about these people.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
sad thing.
I think because they try, in as much as they can in a very short period of time to establish them with real characteristics,
Yeah, and I
right?
think it's to the actors' strengths that they actually managed to do that in the limited time that you're given with them before this all breaks loose.
But they have to, it can't be enough that Ellie's taken from them. They have to raise the stakes. Not all the kids are going to make it. And
No, but they did actually go there with the kids that live down the hall.
yeah.
Those poor kids. Oh, the little kid who gets chased down the hallway by Ellie when you're seeing this through the keyhole, and then he gets thrown like unmercifully. That's a heavy scene.
So though that like I was actually surprised that Bridget was possessed first because I thought for sure it would be Danny, right? Because he was
Because
the
it's
one,
his fault.
right?
He's damn right that it's his fault.
Right, because where I'm not going after there's been an earthquake into a hole in the
Mm-hmm.
ground that just opened up. That's not like number one on my priority list.
Mm-hmm.
So not only does he go into this hole in the ground, but he takes the time to wander around and check things out, and he finds dun, 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 a book, wrapped in rags. And of course, if you know anything about this franchise, you know what's under those rags. You don't need to see it get unwrapped to know what's in there. And then he finds these 3 records, which he also takes because he, unlike every other Gen Z kid, he has a turntable because he's into vinyl, apparently.
Yeah, he's like a wannabe DJ. Like that's like he pretends he's DJing to a massive crowd in his room.
So very convenient that he has one of these and he doesn't just have his phone to play music, because they do, of course, need to have somebody play the incantation aloud.
To my perception anyway, I think that the book clocked all this and caused the earthquake to begin with.
And then called him because he was curious, because he was the kind of person who would be curious.
Exactly, yeah. Look. First of all, you got crosses hanging surrounding this thing. Yes. I'm out from that point on. But not only taking out the book, unwrapping it, flying cockroaches. Okay. Okay, I'm done. Right here.
And then when you see the teeth, basically, right, on the outside of the book, you're like, no, I wouldn't open that thing up.
No, I think the face on the cover, before I even saw those teeth. But that's the most fascinating aspect of this, after the fact, because the director has gone through many interviews saying that this is canon with the other movies, with the Bruce Campbell movies as well, that there are 3 books. And these, not only are there 3 books, but it's the 3 books that we saw in Army of Darkness.
Yep.
And this is one of those books, the flying book that attacked him specifically. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, I made a note of that too, that And he, of course, I'm sure you've seen, heard that Bruce has a voice cameo as a voice on the record telling people not to mess around with the Book of the
Yeah,
Dead.
apparently he bought tickets to this lecture that the priest was giving or snuck in the back or something because
Right.
it is not only is it Bruce, it's supposed to
It's to
be
be
Ash.
Ash. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's nice because again, you're kind of walking this line where you're trying to appeal to the fans of the original series. And also you want to reestablish this for like, a new generation of horror fans ultimately, right? That's why you reboot things because you want like a new, set of fans to come back to watch another one. And it was interesting to me because I mentioned this movie to a friend of mine. Actually, I'm sorry. I mentioned Evil Dead to a friend of mine, and he was like, "Oh, isn't that movie that's out now?" And I'm like, "No, I'm talking about the original." And he's like, "I didn't know there was an original." So like
what?
he wasn't
What?
he's not like a huge horror fan, and he had no idea about the original series. So I think sometimes like if you grew up in the 80s and you were exposed to all these films, you think, well, of course, everybody knows about the original, blah, blah. But like a lot of people don't, especially if they're younger than us. They just haven't been exposed to that stuff. So I think that if you go into this as like just a person walking in knowing nothing about Evil Dead, the references won't mean anything to you, but they won't harm you either. And you might like this just as a horror film on its own. I
Um,
think it's hard if you're a super fan because you're aware of all this stuff. But I do think that, there's a generation of kids who have no idea about the original, and they were the ones who turned out for this film because this film made a lot of money.
yes, the most successful theatrically at the box office of all the Evil Dead
Hmm.
movies.
It did really, really well. It did so well. I was surprised it went to streaming so fast. I was surprised they didn't try to
Yes.
hold on for a couple more
Yeah,
weeks.
and it's interesting to note that it was meant to be a straight to HBO Max movie. They weren't going to release it in theaters until they did test screenings and they worked so well. So then they thought,
Mhm.
well, we got to put this out in theaters. But I think that's par for the course lately because we've been seeing movies like Renfield, Dungeons and Dragons hitting streaming mere weeks, not months after their theatrical debuts. So I don't know what's going on.
I don't know. And we've talked about this before, how, the horror audience has been the most consistent audience going back to theaters post-pandemic. So, it seems like a no-brainer to release this in the theater and then to try to like kind of squeeze all the juice out of the lemon, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it just like they probably could have made another 20, $30 million if they left it in the theater for a couple more weeks.
Yeah, it's not like it's got any competition horror wise.
Yeah. So one thing I really liked, just speaking of the references, is the kids who came to the door and asked if she wanted to watch all the Freddy movies. Because, as you know, as a fan of the original series, that Sam Raimi and Wes Craven were having a long distance conversation with each other, referencing each other's films from the first Evil Dead on. Where in the first Evil Dead, there's the Hills Have Eyes poster, and then
Hmm.
Wes had they were watching Evil Dead in the house in Nightmare on Elm Street, and then Freddy's glove is actually in the cabin in Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, and so on. And they just kind of went back and forth with each other until Wes's passing. So I really liked that the director kind of threw in that reference, just kind of keeping that like little conversation with Wes Craven alive.
The two you assume they're brothers, like one
Yeah.
one slightly older that's Bridget's age,
Hmm.
who is sweet on her, and then his
Yeah.
little brother. They come to the door and she's talking to him through the keyhole. It's like, oh, we're gonna watch all the Freddy movies, and then the little brother says, even the ones that suck, none of them suck.
Yeah. And that was again like it felt really real. She opened the door to them. She talked to them for a second and then she said in your dreams and she close the door. But then she peeks back through the keyhole and you see him kind of go like he's going to try to knock again and say something. And then he's like, "Mm,"
Yeah.
like he sort
Hmm.
of realizes like that was his overture and it didn't work. But you can tell she's also kind of interested. And it feels like a real interaction. That's, I think, one of the strengths of this movie is that the interactions between people feel real.
Soon after that, once Danny starts to play the records, and of course he plays the one where the priest is very ill-advisedly reading from the book and recording it, no less.
Yeah.
Then he can't stop it because it starts to creep him out, and then he tries to lift the needle and the needle won't lift. And then you see the point of view, like from the street, of the demon coming at the building. And then poor Ellie's about to do the laundry. She's going down the elevator, which she said never use the elevator after an earthquake, and she does.
Again.
They would have got her anyway, but
Yeah. But
yeah.
again, kind of telegraphed, like you go in the elevator, there's going to be a problem.
Sad because she fights it.
Hmm.
And then there's like a little throwback to the tree, the vine scenes
Yep.
from the first one, and I think it's in the remake, which I never saw as well. But the cables from the elevator like are stringing
Tying
her
her
up
up.
like a puppet. And you could tell in the elevator this particular demon is assessing her,
Hmm.
and she does fight it, and she even fights it when she gets back to the apartment. She
Yeah.
tells her sister, "Don't let it take my baby. It's in me."
Yeah.
So she's there
Hmm.
still. She starts to break the eggs, which is crazy because there's blood in the eggs. And
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of time before she goes full possession. Your heart goes out to this character, because she's committed to her kids. They've not made her unlikable at all.
Hmm.
So it is, again, I'm going to say it again, it's like a tragedy, the way that it plays
Yeah.
out.
But then, unfortunately, I think once she goes in the hallway, her character is sidelined for a long time. There's a long period of time where, probably in real time, it's not that long, but it feels long. There's the first time when she kind of tricks her way in, trying to get back inside with Cassie, who thinks her mom is back. But then there's this pretty long period of time where like she's in the hallway and they're kind of Beth and Danny are trying to figure out like should we listen to this record and like the third record and figure out if there's a way to kill, get rid of the demons. Bridget becomes possessed. All that stuff kind of happens inside the apartment and Ellie's outside and you really don't see what's going on with her, because you just saw a little bit through the keyhole. So there's like a pretty longish stretch, I feel like, where her character's not really present.
One of the great strengths of this is, and this is also given away in the trailer, is when she does go full demon, when they try to put her in the bathtub because she
Yeah.
revives, but she's burning up like with fever.
Yeah.
So they try to put her in the bathtub to cool her down. And then, the big reveal is, and then there's the line with Mommy's with the maggots now. And she jumps up on the ceiling and then that she's too far gone for any help.
I also thought Sutherland's definitely committed to the physicality of this performance for sure. Like to the way she holds her head and the way that she holds her body, like sort of even aside from like effects or like things where she's clearly on a rig, she's very committed to the physicality of this performance where you can tell that this is a demon, this is not Ellie.
Right. So once she's in the hallway, there's a lot of there's some that happens on camera actually, but there's some deaths that happen off camera. So these neighbors are completely expendable. So none of them offer any help to Beth. They just are there to be killed in the hallway almost immediately by Ellie. The one guy, I guess he is the dad or the older brother of the two kids. I
thought maybe older brother.
Maybe older because he was young.
Yeah.
Young. He gets his eye eaten out. And it's Bruce doing the Foley work. Apparently.
I read that. Yeah.
He was chewing on an apple to get that sound effect. And then she spits the eye out, and just like Evil Dead 2, it flies through the air into the kid with the Cheetos who was trying to hit on Bridget, and he swallows it.
Well, at least in Dead by Dawn, she didn't swallow it. She spit it out.
He went full hog and he swallowed it. And then the other guy who it was established he had a rifle and he uses it, doesn't work. And then there's like not a long scene, but they establish that they can get out through the vacant apartment 82. They dedicate some minutes trying to get through the door, and then Beth does a little bit later. So you're thinking there is going to be a sequence in that apartment. Never happens.
Yeah. It is almost like story-wise, it's like a dead end. You're almost wondering, like, why are we spending time on this?
It kind of ties in with our second feature because there's an apartment like that in that movie as well that they actually do get into, and that there's some exposition in there. So you're thinking, oh, is that something to do with the book? Is that like that's why the apartment is closed off? But you never find out.
Right. Yeah. And it does feel almost like a waste of time in a film that's only about an hour and 35 minutes long.
A movie like this, I think, needs to move fast and needs to
yeah. And because of that, though, I'm saying, like, there's no space for fat. You know what I mean? There's no space because it is short and because it's trying to get to where it's going quickly. There's no time for like this kind of weird, almost pointless exercise in the hallway, except to have the neighbors out in the hallway when Ellie gets out there. That's really what it seems like it's there for, is to have them there to get them out in the hallway so that they're present for her to go after once she's ejected from the apartment.
And it also provides her allies at the end, like demonic allies. So all these people that she's killed become demons, for the final act. But while Ellie's out in the hallway, there's still some drama happening inside the apartment because, as we said, Bridget gets possessed first.
Yeah. That's pretty sad because, I mean, you like all the kids. But I found this actress so appealing. There's just something about her.
Now, this was filmed in New Zealand, so I assume all these actors are Australian or New Zealand actors.
I know for sure that Alyssa Sutherland is, I think Lily Sullivan, who plays Beth, is also. I'm not sure about the other kids, but, I've just found the actress, her name's Gabrielle Eccles. I'd never seen her before. I just found her very appealing in a way, and I just hope that I can see her in something else again.
She had the worst end of the stick in terms of vomit because she had some black bile going on.
Yes. I mean, may I just say, if you are a person who does not have a stomach for gore, and I think a lot of the gore is almost comical because it's so excessive. But like, if you don't have a stomach for that, like, there's a lot of gore, there's a lot of goop, there's a lot of like just
as you said, it's not realistically portrayed, I think, with the exception of the cheese grater.
The cheese grater is really just like even if you have a strong stomach, you're gonna wince when you see that because that's really just like
and it's Bridget that gets to do that. She is she has that main scene there after she's possessed. So they manage to subdue her because she gets Daphne through the head. But even though she does fall over, quote unquote, dead, we know that that's not going to be the end of her. So Danny very smartly ties her up. Doesn't work, but he does make an effort.
Yeah, he's like, I just wanted to make sure just in case, So, and think about, and again, this is where I say sort of the fat on the scene of like this pointless exercise with the hallway. What he could have done is showed this scene where Danny's tying up his sister, right? Think about the grief involved in like, your sister's dead. She's been possessed.
And it's your fault.
Right? It's your fault. You feel responsible. And I think at that point in the film, it would have really helped sort of drive that tragedy home if you saw how difficult it was for him to do this task. It just seems like sort of a missed opportunity in terms of like emotion for the film.
It allows them time, however, because Ellie's still outside.
Right.
They tie up Bridget. It allows them to go to the Necronomicon box set, take out disc 3, and
The box set.
and start spinning disc 3 because
Mhm.
Beth, once Danny confesses, this is all my fault. It's because I found this record and I played it, and that's when all this all started happening. Says, well, maybe if there's another record, maybe this will stop it if I play this. So we play it, and this is almost verbatim what you've heard in the other movies where I can't believe it. Instead of Henrietta, it's like my other 2 priests have been taken, and I'm the only one left. The only thing I can do is total body dismemberment, And even for this guy, this poor guy, that doesn't work apparently because he's like, I can't, I did it, and all the pieces are coming after me. I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, first, what you should do is destroy the record that you made when you said the word.
Right. Try not to pass on this trauma to anyone else.
Exactly.
And then while you're at it, maybe you want to like bury this book in a hole deep away from civilization,
And nobody knows what it is. It should be like in the deepest, darkest basement of the Vatican or something. At least the cat survived, though. I didn't have to. I didn't have to suffer through a scene like that.
Lee Cronin said that he couldn't cross that line. He thought about it, like having the cat become possessed. And then he was like, I can't do it. People are going to be traumatized enough.
I know. Forget the little brother who gets thrown through the hallway like a rag doll.
Beth has the headphones on and she's, not really paying attention to her surroundings. And then you see Ellie come out of the ceiling behind her.
Like a spider.
But once that happens, like the film starts accelerating to the denouement, which inevitably leads to a chainsaw.
And a wood chipper, which is also teased at the very beginning. You're like, oh, come on. That is not going to come into it. Of course it is.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Right. Because very conveniently, there's like a tree removal truck in the garage of the building that they live in, which just happens to have a wood chipper
and a chainsaw.
Just very handily placed. But first, before they get there, they have to, experience the Stanley Kubrick elevator of blood.
Not before they try again to get into apartment 82.
Yeah. Which, may come back in a sequel, right? Like, what's behind the door in apartment 82? I want to see this story come to fruition.
So, there's the blood-filled elevator. And as that's happening, like all the possessed become like one big spider thing because Ellie can't walk anymore because Beth had the gun and blew her leg off and blew her arm off. So she's immobile. So all the other possessed come to her and they create one like mashup of like, one being with all arms and legs.
Which honestly is convenient because then you have like one target, right? You don't have to try to deal with like multiple things coming at you, like in a zombie movie. Just one target, just follow where that target is and take it down.
So they survive the blood-filled elevator, just like The Shining. It opens to the lobby and it all comes out and they make it to the parking garage.
So at this point, it's just Beth and Cassie, the youngest.
Yeah, because Danny has also been possessed. They've gone this way with the other ones. Like if you get scratched or bitten, then you will turn as well. Although I would like to know, like, I just want a guidebook, like the logistics of this thing. Is it a different demon now?
Or is it like splitting off?
Is it splitting off? Because when Jessica gets it, she gets it from like 5 different angles. So you're assuming that it's 5 different entities that are coming at her. I don't know.
Not clear.
But you're not meant to ask these things, I guess. You're not meant to. Not when there's a wood chipper. Not when there's a wood chipper there. They get in the car and the car starts. Not an Oldsmobile, by the way, which is off. They have all these other Easter eggs, but not that.
Not the Delta.
And they have like a garage door opener where they can get in and out of the building. And there's like a gate that comes up that only works half the time. And I watched this movie twice. And I couldn't figure out why they couldn't get out because the gate rises and then suddenly the car stops. Is it because it stalls or is it because it gets stuck on something? It just was moving too fast and I didn't even.
It looked like the gate only went so far, right? It didn't like go high enough for the car to go through.
But it looked to me like the car got stuck on something. Maybe I'm just concentrating on the wrong thing here.
Because I'm thinking about, because what they do is they get out of the car
They have
and
to, yeah,
then,
and they're not even by the gate yet. They haven't even made it to the gate yet.
right, and then they run to the gate and they roll under it. So my
Mhm.
impression is that the gate didn't actually rise
Go
high
up all the
enough.
way because it was
Yeah,
closing as they tried to roll under it.
yeah,
And then Cassie gets dragged back, much like the girl at the end of our second movie, into the darkness. And then it's almost like I think she made up her mind beforehand, but Beth is now like, I am going to be a mother, and
right.
goes after Cassie.
So now it's Newt and Ripley.
Yeah. Of course, the Deadites don't take Cassie over, just so you can have your happy ending. They just hold her like bait in the back
Mhm.
of this truck until Beth has enough time to get in there, get the chainsaw, and have the final fight with this, multiple arms and legs spider creature. And of course, they try to put her in the wood chipper. She survives, turns the tables, and now this thing goes whole hog into the wood chipper. So it's just blood and gore spewing
Mhm.
out of this.
Yeah.
So talk about over the top. And you see skin stretching and ligaments and everything that you'd hope for in a scene like this until all that's left is Ellie's head. And she just has to get one last parting shot off at Beth, like calls her a groupie because that's the one thing that Beth hates above all else is being dismissed as a groupie when she is in fact a guitar tech for this band. Beth does her best field goal kick on that head and puts Ellie into the shredder. So unfortunately, that's the last we see of Ellie and Alyssa Sutherland in this movie.
Yeah. And at this point, everything and everyone remaining are covered in blood.
Including Beth and Cassie are
Right.
sticky with it. So
Yeah.
she picks up the chainsaw, has Cassie in one hand, and they exit triumphantly from the building.
Yeah.
So to do
I
what?
know.
Report to the police that they've just murdered 6 people? I don't know.
Well, and then this is what's interesting, right? So now it transitions to this final scene in the movie. And this is where we pick up again with Jessica, right?
Yes, because you never are given any indication that there are other people that live in this building, other
Right.
than the ones that live on the floor that Ellie does.
Right. We know that the building's condemned, and we know that there's some other people in the building because there's other cars in the garage. But yeah, it's almost like the whole building has no idea that this massive tragedy occurred, on some floor of their building. Like nobody seems aware of. I mean, when I lived in a big apartment building like that, I could hear everything.
Yeah, and the stairwell collapsed at one point.
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of surprising that nobody like calls the police and
Because
be like, I
Jessica
hear a
comes
lot
out.
of screaming upstairs.
Jessica comes out of her apartment. No, let's go to the cabin in the woods. On the phone with the girl that she scalps a little bit later on.
Right. And so then this is where you're talking about like people calling the police or whatever. If you went into a parking garage and you saw the car covered in blood, right, which is the first thing that she sees, and then you see all the blood everywhere, which by the way, it would smell like
Because she doesn't see
really.
it. She doesn't see it right away. She's too busy talking on the phone.
Right. But wouldn't you smell it? I
You
mean,
would. Yes,
wouldn't
you
you be
would.
like,
It'd
because
be like
there's
a butcher shop in there.
yeah, like there's a lot of blood.
Mm-hmm.
And she immediately walks over to it, which is not what I would do. Again, just like with the earthquake, like my priorities would not be to go into the hole that just opened up in the ground. She walks over to the blood instead of doing the smart thing, which is leaving the building immediately, and calling the police. Because, like, my first thought would be, like, there's a serial killer,
But she doesn't get much of a chance to because she is attacked from every direction.
Yes.
By these unseen forces. Now, this begs the question, or it actually just begs for me to point this out, not the question. Possessed by 5 demons at once, she manages to get in her car, drive, pick up her friend, and then drive further to the cabin in the woods whilst possessed by 5 demons.
and then appear relatively normal, but maybe just like she's ill because they're
Right.
like, oh, she doesn't feel good.
I gave her Klonopin so she can sleep it off.
Right. So like she just appears slightly ill.
It's not worth it to think about it too much.
But again, let's talk about the missed opportunity here. As if you're a demon, why would you go to an isolated cabin in the woods when there's a whole city full of people that you can possess?
Well,
Doesn't make
that's
sense.
apparently that's their favorite place to be. It's like once they get in this girl, whoa, she's going to a cabin in the woods. We're in. We're back home.
They like pastoral settings.
They do. They do.
I mean,
they like hardwood floors.
but all I can think is, why would it want to go to this place where there's no other
Where
people
there's no
to
other
possess?
people. Yeah.
You know, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's where we end up. You know, it's all circular. It ends in the beginning. But this was a success, as we mentioned. 132 million it made on a budget of 20 million.
I'm seeing 15 to 19 million.
Yeah, I rounded up. So, but even if I round up, that's still an out of the park hit for this.
Yeah, for sure.
So Bruce Campbell, understandably, is saying, well, you know, instead of waiting 10 more years to make one, let's make one every 2 to 3 years now.
Sure.
Yeah, because I think the plan was with the 2013 movie was to continue with the character that survived from that and then eventually tie her up with Ash. That never happened. So are they planning on continuing with this character, or is it just going to be, you know, same thing in a different setting or what have you? I don't know. But hopefully they do, because I would like to see, if they're going to make another Evil Dead movie, I would like to see this character again of Beth.
Yeah, and I think too that you have to have the requel, right? You have to have the Ash interact with the new character in some way. Although I'm sure that Bruce Campbell has had enough of having blood dumped on him at this point in his life. I don't know if you follow Lily Sullivan or Alyssa Sutherland on Twitter, but they've both been posting really adorable behind the scenes videos of different things they experienced on the set. And one of the most recent things Lily Sullivan posted was a shot of her dumping a bucket of blood on Lee Cronin's head.
like Gatorade?
Yeah. Like, you know, he had it coming.
Right. Even though it doesn't have the Oldsmobile, as we said, it does have a lot of Easter eggs in it that tie back to the old movies. You know, dialogue is only scratching the surface of what's tied back to the other movies. It's distributed by New Line, which the first movie was as well. Even though this is a Warner's movie, it's also co-distributed or co-produced by New Line Cinema. It's got that the fly buzzing at the beginning, and at the very end, if you hang around until the credits are completely over, you'll hear that little fly buzz again. The tattoos on Ellie's arm are vines, which is a homage to the unfortunate vine scene in the very first movie. The pizza box that the kids buy, Henrietta's Pizza.
Yep. There's a lot of references in this movie.
Yeah.
A lot. And that's why I say it was kind of nice, because it did feel like it was trying to be respectful of the original audience and, you know, give people something, you know, who were fans of this franchise, but at the same time trying to establish something new. So like, as far as like a reboot goes, like, I probably feel better about this than I expected to, you know, because I really do love the original series. I mean, especially Dead by Dawn. I mean, just, you know, when they started saying Dead by Dawn, I just got excited because I love Dead by Dawn so much.
It'd be hard to top that. Even with Army of Darkness, you'd be hard to top that.
Well, I think because Dead by Dawn, you know, it's like sits right in the sweet spot of what they do best, right? So it's scary, it's suspenseful, it's gory, but it's also funny. It has like a little bit of everything, whereas Army of Darkness really starts to feel like a comedy.
For those of us that saw Dead by Dawn before Army of Darkness even came into existence, that's what sold you on this franchise. That's what sold you on Bruce Campbell. If you saw Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn in the 80s, I don't care who you are a lifelong Bruce Campbell fan after seeing that one movie.
Because he has to spend so much of the movie carrying it by himself, right? He's
Yeah.
by himself in this
Hmm.
cabin, and he's got to do this work where, he's trying to sustain the audience's interest while he's alone in this cabin in the woods. So, I do think it's their best work together, you know, the
Right.
three of them.
Right.
It's just the thing that it just feels like a perfect amalgamation of all their sensibilities, and obviously the effects work on that is amazing, and all those guys have gone on to do some really high profile stuff in terms of
Hmm.
effects work. So all that said, you know, I think that as far as a reboot goes, I feel pretty good about this. I feel like if they stick with Lee Cronin and he can try to make something of it of his own, then I think the franchise is in good hands.
Yeah, as long as they go to a different place,
Yeah.
like mix it up a little bit more next time. And if you bring Ash into it, how could you not mix it up? So, if we're giving buckets to this now, this is like buckets of blood, I think, rather than
Yeah.
popcorn buckets in this case. I thought it was fine. I enjoyed it. It didn't even approach, for me, it's probably unfair to compare it, but Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness. And it was, I think, a lot more grim than I was expecting. Again, I just liked these characters too much to see them dispatched in the way that they were. It was still an enjoyable film experience, and I will give it the props that it deserves. It does deliver in the suspense and blood department. So I'm going to give it 3.25 buckets.
I'm gonna say three. Again, like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the references. I always enjoy in a horror movie denouement when it gets just ridiculous, which it does at the end of this movie. And I don't know if it would have been different if I was in the theater, but I don't think so. I genuinely don't think so. This just wasn't really scary to me. And I mean, I'm sure you experience this because you watch a lot of horror movies. When you kind of know what's coming, sometimes it's hard to I just want to feel my heart rate get raised. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the scenes in here, like I said before, it kind of hits on all those established points that you're already used to if you've seen another Evil Dead movie. I left the theater, and I saw it again afterwards, and it didn't really change my opinion that much. I left the theater thinking, okay, I'm going to give this 3. But as we've been talking, and I thought more and more about the character of Ellie and how good Alyssa Sutherland is, I think I added a quarter just for her.
Yeah. And I mean, she was really good. They were all good. And again, sort of to the credit of this movie that they try to flesh out these characters in the limited time that they have so that you can care about them, so you can feel invested in their story, whereas a lot of times, if you just know the characters are going to be eliminated, they don't even bother trying to
Yeah.
draw
Mhm.
them as real characters. So that is one thing that this movie does really well.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to the concession stand now.
Mm-hmm.
Christina, what are you buying us today?
Well, so you didn't seem too enthused about this. Are you not a toffee fan?
Well, I reacquainted myself with toffee. I
Yeah.
bought myself. Well, I don't want to announce what you're doing. Why don't you announce what we're doing
Oh,
first?
well, I just thought I wanted to get a candy bar. And I was trying to find a candy bar that had been in like a horror movie or something. There is a candy bar in Trick or Treat, but I haven't watched that in a long time, and I couldn't remember which kind of candy bar it was.
What do they feed Gizmo in Gremlins? Isn't that a candy bar? A Mars bar? Doesn't the science teacher feed? No, it wasn't Gizmo. It was one of the twin
One of the other
Mogwais. Yeah.
I don't remember.
I think it was a Mars bar, but that's besides the point.
Yeah. So I was trying to come up with a horror movie candy bar, but I couldn't remember. I haven't watched Trick or Treat in a long time. I didn't have time to rewatch it, and then I was like, well, okay. So I picked Heath bar, but it turns out there's like a huge amount of drama around this candy.
Whenever I think of Heath bar, I assume that this is like one of the oldest candies that is out there.
And that's what it seems like it should be, right? Especially because it's billed as a milk chocolate English toffee bar. So it
Yes.
seems like it's something that would come from overseas, that it would be an import, all this stuff. But no, it is not. Like so many things, it's not originally from Chicago, but it is from Illinois.
Okay.
First manufactured by Heath Brothers Confectionery in 1928. But there's a slightly older story here, which is that in 1913, a school teacher named L.S. Heath bought a confectionery shop in Robinson, Illinois, as a business opportunity for his two oldest sons. So, like, dad's like, here you go, have a confectionery shop as a present. And in 1914, the brothers opened a combination candy store, ice cream parlor, and manufacturing operation. And then at some point, they acquired a toffee recipe from a traveling salesman. And they began marketing the toffee in 1928 as Heath English Toffee, proclaiming it America's finest. So it wasn't even their original recipe. It was a recipe that they had purchased
Just from Fly By Night Guy.
From Fly By Night Guy. And then in 1931, their father, who had bought them this confectionery store, then persuaded them to sell it and come work with him at his dairy, which he'd opened. He'd opened a dairy factory. So they brought their candy making equipment with them, and then they established a retail business within the dairy factory and started marketing their toffee confection on the dairy products order form that the Heath Company dairy trucks would drive around. So if people don't know, back in the olden days, people didn't go to a grocery store to get their milk. Their milk was delivered from a dairy farm. You know, you'd get bottles brought to your door, and people could order a Heath toffee bar on the order form for the dairy. So you could order your milk and your cream cheese and your butter and whatever, and then you could also order a Heath bar. Because it was made with like the fresh milk from the dairy, they sort of marketed it as almost like a health bar. Basically, it's still the same formula as it was today. It had milk chocolate almonds, creamery butter, sugar cane, but the motto at the bottom of one ad read Heath for better health. And they would sell it with these illustrations of like milk and cream and butter, and like so that people would associate Heath bar with like healthy, fresh farm food. It grew in popularity during the Depression, like a lot of things that we've talked about on this show. Even though it was smaller than a lot of candy bars, it was only 1 ounce. But it still cost 5 cents, which was equal to the price of larger candy bars. But probably what sold it, even though it had a smaller size, is that a piece of toffee is pretty rich, right? So like you can break off a little piece and you can kind of, suck on it or whatever for a little while. You can sort of make it last longer is what my theory. Now, here's what's sort of interesting about Heath Bar. First of all, the family invested in an oil lease near Newton, Illinois, and the lease struck oil, and they made a huge amount of money. So suddenly they had all of this money to market their products. And then, biggest lucky break of all time, in 1942, the U.S. Army placed an order for Heath bars to be included in soldiers' rations.
Wow.
So every American soldier got a Heath bar.
Wow.
Yeah.
They've got a captive audience right there.
Yes. So first of all, they struck oil, so they made $1 gajillion. Then the U.S. Army placed this order, so then they sold a gajillion more Heath bars.
Yeah. So when the war's over and all these GIs come home,
yeah,
they're going right to their corner store and selling out Heath bars.
Yes. And then the popularity of the bar grew after the war. It did remain a family operation for a very long time. L.S. Heath, his 4 sons, 2 daughters, and grandchildren incorporated into L.S. Heath and Sons Incorporated. In the 1950s, they actually made a Heath toffee ice cream bar.
Really?
Yes, which seems pretty early for that transition if you think about it, because I know that I've seen like Snickers ice cream bars
Yeah,
and
now
Crunch ice
you can
cream
find any
bars,
chocolate bar in an ice cream form.
but I assume that because they had the dairy, that crossover seemed natural.
Yes, yes. So I'm assuming this is like vanilla ice cream with chunks
Yeah.
of the chocolate Heath bar in there.
Or maybe coated in chocolate with chunks of Heath
True,
in the
yeah.
coating.
Hmm.
By 1955, their operation had grown to produce 69,000 candy bars centers at one time. So basically, like they could make the center of the bar, 69,000 of them at one time. The automatic,
The hard toffee
yeah,
center of the bar. Okay.
yeah. The automatic wrapping machine could turn out 1,600 bars per minute. And then they had candy salesmen, because it was still a family operation, that went around the country to sell to wholesale distributors. And then they also sold directly to theaters, to movie theaters. So it is, in fact, a concession treat from the 50s. Then the huge national success of the bar led to disagreements in the family, as money inevitably does. And then at least one grandchild was expelled from the business in 1969, and he wrote a book, a tell-all, in 1995 called Bittersweet, The Story of the Heath Candy Company. So they were still a family business until about 1989. They sold the business to Leaf Incorporated, and then in 1996, the North American confectionery operations of Leaf were purchased by Hershey. And it's still under the Hershey distribution in this country to this day, although the European confectionery operations is run by a different.
Yeah, we've seen that
company.
quite a bit
Yeah.
in researching this stuff. How, like in the U.S., there might be like a different manufacturing process than there is overseas. So the possibility of there being different tastes to these things or different consistencies is pretty high.
So what's interesting about Hershey buying it is that Hershey had actually created the Score Bar in 1981 to compete with Heath. And I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I do remember it. They don't still make that?
They apparently still make it, but I've not seen one in a long time, a Score Bar.
My experience with Heath bars is that they're too sticky, like in terms of getting stuck in your teeth.
It's toffee.
I always
Yeah.
hated the fact that it felt like I had an extra set of teeth after I ate one because they were just, I couldn't even get it down. It was just, everything was stuck in my teeth. So I got myself, just so I could reacclimate for today's discussion, I got myself one single Heath bar at the drugstore yesterday. And last night after dinner, I ate it, but I was smart. I ate it in small pieces.
Yeah.
And I had to pick it out of my teeth after every single bite so I wouldn't get that buildup. And it was very enjoyable. Although I would have to say that they're missing a marketing opportunity by not packaging a toothpick in with the Heath bar, because you need it. You do actually need it.
Well, I mean, I think you're talking about just the experience of toffee in a general sense, right?
Yes,
Like toffee
yes.
is a sticky candy. But I think one of the things that makes Heath appealing, especially if you're not normally a toffee eater, has very satisfying crunch, like a snap, I think.
Yes, it does. Yes.
And also, it's not too thick.
In equal measures. You get the toffee and the chocolate.
Yeah, you get layers of experience.
Yes.
I am actually very fond of the tiny snack size version.
I saw those in the store as well. Yep.
Of this bar. I think that's pretty nice. And they're very good as a mix-in, as a dairy mix-in. Like if you go to Dairy Queen or something, get Heath Bar in your Blizzard, that's pretty good. It's a candy that is old. I mean, the company, the Heath Bar Company was founded over 100 years ago. But it's not as old as you kind of think it might
No,
be.
I was expecting like a history dating back to Victorian era, so that's surprising.
And the fact that they were able to maintain it as a family operated business well into the 80s, I think it's also fascinating because we've seen with so many of these candies we've talked about on the show where they start off as family businesses and then by like the 50s, some big conglomerate comes along and buys them, and that conglomerate gets bought by something else, and so on, and it all leads back to Ferrara Candy Company. Um, but yeah, this stayed like a family-owned product until the late 80s.
Well, I'm almost disappointed because I was going to exclaim if you didn't actually reveal that Hershey bought them. I'm like, what, is there another player now out there? But nope, it's Hershey.
Yep.
All right. Well, the Heath bar.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the story of the Heath bar.
So do they have these at your concession stand?
The bite-sized ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
In boxes, in long boxes?
No, in the little bag.
Okay. Maybe you could use the straw as a double purpose to pick these out of your teeth if you forget the toothpick to bring with you to the theater.
Or if you a lot of times I don't like really crunch into them. I just kind of like suck it almost like a hard candy,
Yeah.
Like I bite a little piece off and then suck it like a hard candy and then like it kind of melts and then it lasts longer too.
Right. Okay.
So especially because it's usually, like I said, a small bar, like a small item.
Right.
So.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll take our bars, go back to the theater, and we will sit down with Rec. Now, I'm glad you did clean your glasses because we're going to need to read some subtitles. This is a Spanish film.
Yeah.
Now, I was convinced that you'd already seen this. Not that I'd ever heard you say it, but just because it's very well regarded in horror channels. I just assumed that you had seen it already.
It's a timing thing. So I looked at the year, right? It came out 2007.
Mm-hmm.
In 2007, I had a newborn.
Okay. So this is before, Netflix or anything else. So
right.
Yeah,
so I feel like there was a period of time right after my son was born. You know how it is with kids, like the first 2 or 3 years where you're like, everything cultural just went by me,
Yeah.
And then you kind of reawaken, then you can start paying attention to stuff again. So yeah, this was one that had like literally just gone by me.
So it is a found footage movie. So if you're prone to inertia, the camera does move around a lot.
Vertigo, you mean?
Yeah, but it earns it. I think that this is a very effective horror movie, and it is one, if not the best example of the found footage genre. And I think at the time, obviously Blair Witch and things like that came out years before, but then you got your Paranormal Activity 1, 2, 3, 50, or however many of those that they made. But I think this really stands out in the genre, and I think it's really effective. And it's not really, just like 28 Days Later or 28 Weeks Later is not technically a zombie film, but it's kind of lumped in with the zombie genre. This is kind of in that vein where it's infected people rather than the undead. So much like Evil Dead, it's the same kind of thing is going on in this movie as is in the Evil Dead movies, where it's a case of possession, although you don't know that.
And
Spoiler
I think
alert
to this
until the end. Yes.
I think that is to this movie's detriment. I really, really do. Because you're right. Like, it's a very good as a found footage movie because the premise makes it logical, right? You're following a reporter, she's going with the firemen. She's like makes a TV show called While You're Sleeping.
Right. And this girl, Angela, is adorable, by the way, who is just like anybody's little sister, so it makes what's happening to her all the more terrifying.
She's going to be following these firemen and she's actually hoping that there's a call, right? Because otherwise there's nothing for them to do. And even the fire chief is like, it's like a lottery. Like, we might get a call, we might not. Like, a normal night's pretty monotonous.
Yeah. And believe me, Mr. Chief, you don't want to get a call on this night. And watching this movie again, because obviously I've seen it more than once, and this is just, one of the times I've seen it for the show. I've said this before, where, obviously, how a movie that you've seen before plays out. But in my heart of hearts, I'm thinking maybe they won't get the call this time. Maybe she'll
Oh,
be safe and
maybe
stay
they'll
in the
just
fire
stay there.
department. Yeah.
But there's a few things that happen that, are very, very haunting right at the beginning of the film. Once they get the call and they go out to the building and they enter the building and you hear the screams echoing kind of through the stairwell. I think that's really effective, right? Because it creates this kind of tension because you don't know what they're going to find when they get up to this apartment. All the neighbors are gathered in the lobby and they're like, we heard the screams of this woman and so we called for help. But what happens very quickly, and you're immediately like, why is this happening? But then you figure it out pretty quickly if you can follow dialogue. The two police have showed up, the two firefighters, and then the two news, people from this show, Angela and Pablo, right? Pablo's her cameraman.
Yeah. Who you
And
never see, by the way.
Yeah, just his shoes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They go up to this apartment and this woman is covered in blood. She's screaming, she's acting crazy.
It's like Henrietta from Evil Dead
right.
2.
She bites one of the policemen in the neck. And then, of course, there's like pure panic. And I sort of can't figure out at this point why they don't just lock the door to this clearly cursed apartment, right? Then there's like sort of this panic, right? They're going back down the stairs and this guy's bleeding and there's all this stuff. But then they call the ambulance and all of a sudden the whole building is surrounded. And you're saying to yourself, how can they even
have known that quickly?
Yeah.
Right.
Like what's going on inside this building? And then you can start to put the story together because Angela, they're spending a lot of time waiting, right? Like they've covered this building with plastic and they're making these announcements like remain calm, like we apologize for the inconvenience. Because everyone's going to be totally calm in this situation where there's a guy bleeding out in the lobby. They won't let them take him out to the ambulance. So Angela's going around, interviewing people, and the little girl who supposedly has tonsillitis but already looks like a zombie because her lips are white, says that her dog Max went to the vet. And I was like, oh, the dog was sick. They say that explicitly much later in the film, but like I said, if you can follow dialogue and put pieces together, once she mentions the sick dog, you know that's how they knew.
And that events are already in play that you don't know about. And I think that part of the effectiveness of this is that you're thrown into this situation with, you're looking through Pablo and Angela's perspective. They don't know what's going on. So you don't know what's going on. So you're in a panicked situation as well. And actually before, when they're still in the fire department, it's Manu and Alex are the two firemen that she goes with on this call. And before they even leave, they're talking about, 70% of the calls that we go on, they're not even fires. They're like water leaks, they're pet rescue, demon possession. He says under his
other services is actually what he says.
Services,
right?
Other services. But they get there, and it's a horrifying scene when they go through, because this apartment that they go up to, they hear the screams, and it's the old lady's apartment. But it's a long hallway when they go into her apartment, and they see her on the far end of it.
And she's just standing there.
And as you get closer, you see her. She's covered in blood. I'm like, you don't want to get near her. If you've ever seen a zombie movie, do not get near her. Obviously something is wrong with her. She's acting like any other zombie in a zombie movie. She wants to apparently eat whoever it is that approaches her. And she does take a chunk out of one of the police officers. And then they run back downstairs. They leave one of the firemen up there, or he stays. I don't know, to try to talk it out with this woman. I don't know why he stayed up there with her. But as they're talking in the lobby, he falls,
Yeah.
And it's a big shock scene. He falls like the 3 stories. And apparently it was kind of like the chest burster in Alien, where they didn't really know what to expect. These actors didn't know that he was going to fall. Obviously, it's a dummy. They're not going to actually drop somebody. But their reactions are real.
Real. Yeah, I mean, there's a few like pretty effective scenes in here, but this is why I think that the revelation about the demonic possession is to the detriment of this film. once it starts spreading, it plays out like a zombie movie, right? Everybody gets infected slowly but surely, right? It's just, an inevitability. Everybody's trapped in the building because the authorities have surrounded and they can't get out. One of the tenants tells Angela and Pablo that there's like this way to go through like the sewers basically, but they have to go through this one door that's locked and they need the keys from this intern who lives in the building who sort of has all the keys to the building for reasons that aren't really clear. He's like a caretaker.
Or like he's the assistant caretaker when the real caretaker's not around
Yeah.
or whatever.
So they have to go to his apartment to get these keys. At this point, like basically everybody's infected or about to be. And the stairwell becomes filled with infected people. So they have to keep going up. Now, this room has been mentioned earlier in the film, this penthouse room, and Angela now has all the keys, and she miraculously finds the penthouse key on this key ring that has like 50 keys. So I don't know how she figured out that, like, on the third try, she got inside. And you go into the room and you see like all of these photographs and news articles and all this weird equipment and all this stuff. And you're like, what is going on here? And then it's revealed that
because the camera lingers on some of these articles, so you're able to read the
right,
headlines. It's all about this one girl that's
right.
been possessed.
And then, of course, there's a reel-to-reel tape machine in
Of course.
2007,
Yeah,
Miracle.
well, it's the Vatican, so apparently they don't have the money to to buy
They don't even have
actual
cassette tape.
Right.
And you have to listen to this tape, and then this guy who's a priest is talking about how he's trying to somehow scientifically cure this girl of her demonic possession. But
No,
apparently,
this is the reel to reel is actually the fourth album in the box set from the previous movie.
But he, is trying to like isolate an enzyme, he says.
Which is a really fascinating idea,
Mhm.
that it's like a chemical isolation that they have found. What he's trying to do is isolate the enzyme so he can create a antidote
Right.
for this.
But of course it mutates and everything goes wrong. But the problem that I have here is that number one, I don't think it's 100% clear that it is demonic possession, or if it's just that the Vatican perceives it as demonic possession.
You think that that's to its detriment?
I think it's to its detriment because even though this is a good movie and it is effective as a found footage movie, and yes, like pretty much every found footage horror movie owes a debt to Blair Witch Project. They even have the camera fall over at the end of this movie, just like Blair Witch.
Yeah, because poor Pablo, who does his job admirably well throughout this movie, gets it, unfortunately.
But I think it would have made the events of the movie, I would have perceived them differently. I think if I didn't think it was just a regular kind of zombie infection. I wish I had known like halfway through the movie that this was like a demonic possession.
That's what rewards you on subsequent viewings with this. Now, I read this is out of the box hit in Spain. And it made some money in the US. It's a very well-renowned movie around the world in terms of horror circles. It was never meant to have a sequel, so they wanted it to be ambiguous. And I think that's what kind of unsettles me about this is that you're still not certain what's going on at the end of the movie. And I've never watched the sequels because I don't think I want to know. I don't want it spelled out for me, because if they didn't mean to make a sequel, that means they had to go back and make something up now,
right,
where maybe they didn't have that thought to begin with.
Right.
They just wanted to give you just enough to give you this impression and then maybe kind of keep it ambiguous to keep it creepy. And I like that. And I still, even after seeing it again this time and enjoying it, I still kind of, even though it's there on Amazon, I kind of don't want to watch Rec 2.
I think that I mean, it still could have been a twist. I just think I would have liked it as like a third act, the beginning of the third act twist instead of like the end of the movie. I think I would have liked to have had that information because it really would make you see the infected differently. I mean, because
Yeah.
just as it is, it just to me, while it's well done and all of that, it just felt like it's a zombie movie, and it didn't really feel distinctive from a lot of zombie movies, especially if you've watched a lot of them. Even though
Yeah.
there's things about it that are effective, but that idea that it might be demonic possession,
And so,
that is what distinguishes it, and they save it until the end, and I just don't think that's doing
but
the movie any
but I think
favors.
that it rewards you on subsequent viewings.
Sure, but you
That's
gotta
why. Yeah.
sure, but you've got to give it, you got to make it go the first time. Do you know what I mean?
We're going to disagree on this. Obviously, we already have, but I think it's to its strength because you're with Angela, you don't know what's going on, you're panicking with her, and to have that exposition early on, and they give you I think there is exposition where they slow things down when that guy with the hazmat suit comes in.
Yeah.
He handcuffs one hand of the guy that's the fireman that's fallen. If you're
Yeah.
worried enough to handcuff him, why aren't you completely binding him to the table? You know,
Yeah.
that this is doing nothing, handcuffing him with one hand.
Yeah. And he does give the exposition because then he affirms what you should have already figured out. Like, we think the dog spread it through his saliva. And as if on cue, the little girl starts puking blood in her mother's
Mhm.
face. Like, just
Yeah.
almost as soon as he says that, this happens.
And then that girl, she jumps
Mhm.
down, runs up the stairs, and I'm like, okay, let her go. I'd be like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's the last we're going to see of her. Let's go back into this textile workshop that's right in the lobby of this apartment building and
Mhm.
close the door.
Yes, exactly. Like what, like I said, why didn't they like lock the door of that like cursed apartment
I
when
know.
they went up there and that woman bit somebody? Wouldn't you be like, okay, we're gonna just lock the door?
Then after
And
the fireman falls, they go back up
yeah,
to the apartment,
I know.
shoot her, and then the young girl that's also possessed and in the
Hmm.
apartment now. They go back a third time after the little girl in the same apartment. There's a few different escape attempts. There's the old Spanish guy who turns out to be totally racist because
Hmm.
he's, insulting.
He's like,
First
it's
of
the
all,
Chinese people in
it's
the
a
building.
Japanese woman and a
Yeah,
Chinese husband
yeah.
who
And
he
he
just
keeps
writes
saying
off as, they're all
they're all
Chinese.
Chinese, right? He's
Hmm.
like, it's the Chinese. It must be coming from the Chinese.
And
Yeah.
I just wrote a note as soon as he appeared on screen, before he even spoke. I'm like, this guy looks like Caesar Romero from the Batman show. And his name was Caesar. That was his character's name.
I'm not saying that they have to reveal it at the beginning of the movie. I'm saying it could be a twist like closer to the end, but I think it would make you see that last 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes a lot differently if it just come a little bit sooner.
Now, the first time I watched this, now I have to ask, did you watch this in the daytime as well?
Yeah, I had to.
Oh, because the first time I watched this, lights were out. My
Hmm.
house was silent, right? So by the end, I was terrified when they were in that apartment and they couldn't
Hmm.
do the Silence of the Lambs,
Yeah. Yeah.
night vision
Night
thing.
vision. Yeah.
Here's another thing that they don't really explain is that, okay, where is the priest, first of all?
Yeah.
They never find a body in
No.
this apartment. As they listen to the tape, suddenly the attic door swings open.
Hmm.
And I am not going to go up there and
This
look
is like
around.
not going into the hole that just formed
Yeah.
in the middle of the garage, right? Don't go in there. Like,
So,
but it,
yeah. So Pablo pokes the camera up. And of course, he goes total 360 and you don't see what's up there until the last possible moment. And it's like this feral kid who is not the girl, the
right, like
completely
where did this
horrific
kid
girl.
come from?
So you never know because they never mentioned that there's a kid missing
No,
in the dialogue.
no.
And I was waiting for that this time. I'm like, okay, I'm
Hmm.
going to listen and to see if but no. So you don't know who this kid is. It's definitely not the priest because it's a kid, obviously. So then they go back down because then Pablo falls after he's
Because
scared
he's
by the
shocked.
kid.
Yeah.
And then out comes, what is her name?
The right, the
Tristana is her
right.
name. And she must have been possessed for quite some time because her features are completely distorted. So
She looks really haunting. This is a very
yes,
haunting figure, like because she looks like she's like starving to death.
because you hear on the tape that the priest has been told to stop the experiments and to, via some kind of a ceremony, kill this girl. And apparently he doesn't do that. Maybe he's left her to starve, in the locked apartment. I don't know. And how the dog got access to her, I don't know.
So many things that are not clear. But
so, and again, I kind of don't want to know. So that's why I know I'm going to watch it eventually, but I've been resistant so far to the sequel. But yeah, this whole sequence where this girl is just kind of lumbering, just this wraith with this horrifically mutated face, attacks Pablo, and then drags Angela off into the darkness. What her fate might be, you don't know. This was played by an actor, because I saw some behind the scenes footage. This very skinny guy, not unlike the guy that played the xenomorph in the first Alien. Yeah. But it's a man, that's that's skinny. It's funny. He's sitting in the makeup chair and he's got like a mustache and a beard. I'm like, how did they cover that up?
I mean, I don't know that you're really looking that closely in that area anyway, right? Because you're just so, you just sort of see like these very long limbs kind of moving through the darkness. And it is a very haunting figure. But I think found footage films too, they do benefit from that kind of closed in feeling. Because I remember seeing Blair Witch Project in the theater, and the first time I saw it, I went twice because Chris and I saw it, and then we went back again with our friends to see it. And I remember the first time we saw it, at the beginning of the film, people were sort of like eating their popcorn and drinking their sodas and just acting the way people normally do in theaters. And then as the movie went on and got more intense, and it just got quieter and quieter and quieter. And then at the end of the film, when she's screaming and running through the building, holding the camera, it was literally like you could feel the entire theater had like this indrawn breath.
Yeah.
But when I watched it again at home, I was like, it just didn't have the same like oomph somehow. And I do think these found footage films really need like this feeling like you're trapped in the situation with the protagonists, and being in a theater helps with that.
They actually did not build any sets for this movie. This was all filmed in an actual apartment building. So this bizarre setup where there's a textile workshop in the lobby actually exists in this. Because you think that's random,
They're in Barcelona, right?
There's a sweatshop right in the lobby of their building. But apparently that's really there. Yep, it's in Barcelona. After the movie was a hit, the building, unfortunately, was vandalized by youths. In 2007, those youths, they always get you in the end. But still, it is a tourist destination, this particular building in Barcelona, obviously for horror fans. Yeah. The longest uninterrupted shot in the movie is 17 minutes long, which I didn't notice because I was too wrapped up in what was going on. They didn't realize this until after the fact, but there's a statue on the roof of the building of a monster grabbing a woman's foot.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's great.
Which is very similar to what happens to Angela at the end of the movie. Now, this was remade. The next year, it was remade in the U.S. as Quarantine. So I don't know if you've ever seen that, but the whole demonic possession was thrown out the window. So it was just like an infection, like 28 days later.
No, I didn't see that again.
Yeah, not. I watched it. Not anywhere near what this movie is.
Still in toddler phase at that point.
Yeah, I forget what the actress's name is that played it but she was I don't know if you ever seen the show Dexter on Showtime, but she was in that show as Dexter's sister, Jennifer Carpenter, I want to say maybe her name is, but yeah, that's here nor there. Quarantine is the American version. Manuela Velasco plays Angela. She is an actual TV news presenter in Spain. And she won the equivalent of the Academy Awards in Spain for this role.
That's cool. Yeah,
she's very good. She is very good in this.
Also considering like in America, they won't even acknowledge that horror movies exist.
Yeah.
At the Academy Awards. So otherwise Mia Goth would have won.
Yeah,
even been
or would have been
nominated.
nominated.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Hmm.
Still, well, she's got another shot with this Maxine movie coming
Can't
out. But
see if they wouldn't do it for Pearl, which is just an amazing performance. I can't see them doing it for a movie about a porn star.
hey, they did it with Burt Reynolds, right? In
Oh, well,
Boogie Nights.
yeah.
The actors never saw the whole script up front, so they
Mm.
never knew like who was going to die or
Same
unless it was
like
on the day. Yeah,
same like Blair Witch, where they were given limited amounts of information.
right. Just
Yeah.
to try to create that atmosphere already.
Hmm.
Made on a $2 million budget, and it made 32 million in U.S. equivalent dollars, and most of that was in its home country, in Spain. So I don't think that this is available dubbed, and not
That's
that I would
okay.
not that I would have any need to see it, but I think it's commendable that it's not even available dubbed. You got to watch it subtitled or not watch it at all.
I feel that way all the time. I don't think
Hmm.
people should watch dub movies. I
Yeah.
think they should watch them in their original language because, part of a performance is people's intonation. Even if you can't understand every single word that they're saying or even any of the words that they're saying, their tone of voice is part of their performance. And, I just think you lose that if you get a dubbed version of anything.
Yeah, it's completely distracting as well if you've got
Hmm.
like a subpar voice actor voicing the
Hmm.
thing, and like you can act badly just by your voice. You don't have to be on camera
Yeah.
either. I've seen this already, and I hold this movie in pretty high regard because it did scare me. My fists were clenched on my couch the first time I watched this thing. And I think it still has a power even with repeated viewings. I'm going to go 4.25 with
Wow.
this one.
Wow.
I really like this movie.
I'm also going to say three. Again, like I do think found footage movies need a little more care in terms of like your viewing experience, and that can definitely impact the way you feel about it. I also just feel strongly that that demonic possession storyline should have come in a little earlier. Um, I think it would have changed the way I was viewing what was happening. It didn't need to come in at the beginning, but I just wanted it sooner.
And again, it does lend a new aspect when you watch this movie again. So it's like watching a new movie the second time you see it when you know
Mhm.
that. But there you have it. We've done a possession. It somehow snuck by me that I've always said that I will not do a possession episode. The Exorcist is still off limits, but
Oh,
somehow these
see,
snuck through.
that you want to talk about like a movie that raises your heart rate, though. I
Oh yeah,
mean,
I've seen it.
that's
I've seen it. It's
yeah.
not like I've not seen it, but I won't watch it again.
Oh, see, and that is one of my favorites
Yeah.
because it's the book really scared me. I remember reading the book when I was 14, and the book absolutely terrified me. And the movie is so well done. Um, and even though you know what's coming, it still has the power to scare you. To me, that's a really good horror movie.
Mm. So, what else did we do this week? Do you have anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, started watching. I mentioned to you guys a few weeks ago that I discovered a new K-drama, and I did start watching it called Divorce Attorney Shin on Netflix.
Hmm.
And it is very typical K-drama in that, like, if you're not used to watching K-dramas, a lot of people will feel really thrown off by the tone of them. A lot of times they have really, like, wildly comedic elements that are contrasted with extremely dramatic elements that also, and the main character almost always has some kind of very tragic backstory, and that is true in this show where the main character has a tragic backstory that's driving everything that he does. And you don't get that impression at all from the first couple of episodes. And then as it goes on, you start to get into that. But it's really good.
You see, now from the relatively highbrow, which you just discussed, I will go completely lowbrow. And I was a huge professional wrestling fan in the 80s when I was a teenager, in those Hulk Hogan days. And I've discovered that those classic shows and events are available streaming on Peacock to a large extent. So I've been reliving my 80s teen years and going through select WWE, as they call them now, programming. So I won't bore you with details, but that's what I've been doing this week. I was like, oh, a gold mine. And I was like a 14-year-old kid again.
I just realized recently that all the Columbo episodes are on Peacock. So,
Well, when we were watching Poker Face, that's what Peacock queued up after several episodes. After
really?
the Poker Face episode would end, you know how it will start to play something that's similar. A couple of times it started to play an old Columbo episode.
Oh, no, mine didn't do that. So I just recently realized that because I went looking for Columbo episodes because I listened to this podcast called Decoder Ring, where they sort of solve cultural mysteries. And they did a 2-part episode that was absolutely fascinating about Columbo and a supposed taped message that Peter Falk made to the Romanian people. And this goes back to a story that he apparently told over and over again, that it was some sort of diplomatic mission, basically. And then the host of the show, really had to dig deep to find like the real story behind this. And it was so, so interesting.
Really?
Yes, it really, really was. So then I was like, oh, I haven't watched Columbo in a long time. So I want to go watch some Columbo.
It's there for the taking. You might as well take advantage.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So next week, we won't have a brand new episode because it's Memorial Day.
Yes.
We will all be, fittingly enough, on vacation. But what we are going to do, now we mentioned Stephen King at the onset and his reactions to the Flash movie. I was on Twitter the other day, and I follow Mr. King on Twitter, and he posted some appreciation for the giant ant movie, Them, which we have covered.
Yep.
So there was, obviously he has over 5 million followers. So whenever he posts something, there's a lot of comment, there's a lot of chatter in the comment fields below his initial post. So I thought, hey, we had the fantastic idea of pairing Jordan Peele's Us with the movie Them, hence Us and Them, as in the Pink Floyd song title. So I posted our artwork. I think I said cue up Dark Side of the Moon, and I just put our artwork in the chatter of, 100 people. And almost immediately, someone liked it, but had blocked off, because you can set on your settings on Twitter, if you like something, you're not revealing who you are. Right. So I would like to think that perhaps Mr. King saw our artwork, appreciated the joke or what we were trying to do, and liked it in appreciation. So I'm going to go to my grave with that one.
One time I made like a funny little graph about like the life of a writer on my Twitter feed. It was a long time ago, like a few years ago. And it was like, 10% of your life is actual writing, 85% is laundry, and 5% is crying. And Paul Tremblay, who we did his book Cabin in the Woods, who's a friend of mine, commented like crying should be bigger. And because Stephen King has blurred Paul's book, Stephen King saw my graph and he said there should be a space for playing with the dog.
Wow.
Yes, but only because Paul had commented and he obviously saw it because of that. And then because he had seen it and he commented on it like a billion other people liked and commented on it. It was like the most engagement I've ever had on a tweet. It was pretty funny.
Wow. So where I was getting with that is that as a TMI rewind, and that was a pretty good episode, I think, is the Us and Them episode. So we're just going to rewind that one. So if you have not listened to that one as of yet, no need to go back and find it. I'll put it out there for you next week.
That sounds good.
So thank you for listening, as always.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And if you're a horror fan and you've listened to us for the first time today, thank you and come back. We've done lots of horror movies and we plan on doing some more again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gonna get
What-
Jeff to a horror movie this summer.
Yes, yes. Yep. I know you're listening.
I think we could get him to see The Boogeyman, right? It's PG-13.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I just watched the Babadook. I should have said that for what else I did this week. I'd never seen that before. First time viewing.
We should pair that with The Boogeyman.
That's why I brought it up because it looks very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, we should pair that with The Boogeyman. That would be great. So don't talk about it yet.
Talk about ambiguous, but yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, everybody. If you like what you just heard, be sure to follow TMI Confessionals of the Nerd Kind on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or whatever you listen to your favorite podcasts on. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and then share it with your fellow movie nerd friends. It means the world to us and helps our listenership grow.
You can also find us on all of the socials, Instagram and Twitter at TMI_podcast 2018. We're on Facebook and YouTube as well. Just look for the Popcorn Bucket.
You can help support this show by visiting our TeePublic page for some TMI branded goodies such as hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, and stickers. tpublic.com/TMI Confessionals, all one word.
A 5-star review would be incredibly nice as well. I'm just saying.
Thanks again for listening. We truly appreciate you. Be sure to come back next week. We'll save some popcorn for you.
That bacon.